Hello, my name is Darrin Doyle, and my favorite thing is horror movies.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and this is the podcast where we learn about people's favorite things and get recommendations without using an algorithm. I'm so excited that I have been doing this podcast now long enough that my authors are coming back with new books. And that's the case today. Darrin Doyle is back. His new novella coming this summer on July 9th is Let Gravity Seize the Dead. And I'm so happy to have you back, Darrin. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me back, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the new book. It's coming out this summer, and we'll start with a synopsis, and then I'll ask about how it came to be.
Sure. Basic synopsis is, well, first of all, it's a novella, like you said. So it's a short novel, and it's kind of a cabin in the woods, horror, literary, gothic story. There are two timelines in it. There's a early 1900s timeline, and there's a early 2000s timeline. The main stuff happens in 1907 and 2007. And the book, this is a cabin built in the woods by the 2007 family's great-grandparents, basically, or grandparents, depending on who you're asking. Basically, it's this man and his wife named Beck and Mallory. They moved their two daughters to this cabin in the middle of nowhere in dense Michigan forest. And this cabin, as I said, was built 100 years ago by their ancestors. And the story just it's kind of a ghost story, haunting story. It may be literal, it may be more psychological, maybe a little of both. But in a sense, I'm kind of playing with the idea of sort of inherited trauma fusing into the nature, the natural world, and kind of just carrying on through generations, even when the new generation doesn't know anything about it.
Yeah. And I think it's something that the idea of inherited trauma is, I think, an idea that more and more people are starting to realize is real. Like it impacts us. There are things we get in our DNA passed through our generations, epigenetics, that it's not a fringe topic anymore.
Yeah, and I honestly didn't even know about that until I was done writing the book, or maybe I had heard it and it just kind of got in my craw and I didn't even notice it. But it just kind of made sense to me that like nature is cyclical and nature retains its history within itself, so to speak. And it made sense to me that this kind of, it's hard to even explain, but yeah, this idea that we can be carrying, almost like you said, the genetics of trauma without realizing it. It wasn't my intention to write that, but once I wrote it and I heard about this, I was like, that's what I was trying to express, I think, with knowing it.
Yeah. Now, is there a scary cabin in the woods in your life?
I wish. No, but well, there's a cabin in the woods that I go to, and I've gone to for a number of years now to get away, to write. On with there's this great state park called Wilderness State Park way up north in Michigan, and there are a number of cabins, and there's about 6 of them, but they're all very isolated from each other. Around on the lake at the top of the Lower Peninsula, but there's this one that's called Nebo Cabin, and it's way tucked in it's about a 2-mile dirt road, but it's more like a 1-lane car path, very, hilly. And that was the inspiration for this cabin in my story as well. So it's a rustic cabin, has no power, it has an outhouse. And so I don't know that, I've been going there for years, and I'm sure that was in my mind when I was writing. It's not that, I don't think, though.
Or the ghosts haven't revealed themselves to you.
That's right. That's right.
So where did this one... It's interesting to me because when I started this podcast, this was my COVID hobby. And so when I met authors the first time, it was often a project they wrote during COVID or edited during the lockdown. got delayed during the lockdown, and now I'm meeting with people that it's fully like post-lockdown effort. So when did you get your first like grain of this story?
It probably was even before COVID or right
Yeah.
around there. I think honestly it was inspired by a writer named Noy Holland, and her novella or short novel Bird. It's not horror really, but she came to our campus a few years back. So forgive me if I can't remember the exact year, but I'm pretty sure it was before COVID. I
Right.
know it was before COVID. So I read that book and I just really admired how every sentence was fresh. There was clearly an effort to not say something in an ordinary way,
Mm-hmm.
but also not be annoying about it either. So the heavy emphasis on style, and so that was definitely an influence when I started this. And then I read, further books that inspired me in that way, like Cormac McCarthy's Outer Dark. He's
Mm-hmm.
obviously an amazing stylist as well. So those two books were very influential to me, and I started there. I didn't know, don't even know if I never have a plot when I start.
Mm-hmm.
I just start rolling and you know capture a voice, capture some characters, a situation, and see where it goes. But this one really started, I think, pre-COVID. I generally have multiple projects going on at
Yeah.
once, so this one ultimately took center stage, but it took a few years before I
Yeah.
concentrated on it.
Yeah. And do you have some book launch events planned for the summer, or is that still coming into focus?
It's still coming into focus. Yeah, I'm not. Summer is a little trickier time for
Yeah.
me to release a book. So if not summer, I'm sure I'm going to have something here in Mount Pleasant, at the bookstore here.
Mm-hmm.
Open to line up a few more, and then fall probably I'll have other readings.
Nice. And is this so your previous book was The Monster in Aisle 34?
The
No,
Beast in
The
34.
Beast in Aisle 34.
Close. Yep.
Is this one you specifically said like the new one is horror-ish?
It's such it's interesting because I don't generally like categorizing.
Yeah.
So it's horrifying, I think.
Okay.
So yes, I think a lot of people would call it horror. I
Yeah.
just tend to think of things in terms of atmosphere, and so yeah, it's got a dark atmosphere. Absolutely, it's not a happy. Yeah, my Beast in Aisle 34. It has a werewolf in it, so it's hard
Right.
to call it horror. This one, I think, yeah, I think it's fair to call it horror or gothic if you consider gothic horror.
Mm-hmm.
It's dark, it's atmospheric. There are bad things that happen,
Mm-hmm.
and there may or may not be ghosts. That
Mm-hmm.
I tend to like stuff that, like what you call Nathaniel Hawthorne horror.
Right.
Story Young Goodman Brown, where what's her name? I can't remember the wife's name. Goes out and encounters all of the upstanding citizens of the town. She goes into a dark forest and finds them all doing some witchcraft and
Mm-hmm.
dark ceremonies. But then it might have all been a dream. We don't know.
Right.
That kind of stuff. So I think, in general, it's going to get put into horror, which I'm fine with. But it's also, I think, a character driven literary,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that means, and that kind of thing. So that's a long winded answer.
Outstanding. So people who are looking for that crisp new style of writing from you, gothic horror, so not straight up jump scares,
That's right. That's right. Yes.
and exploring intergenerational trauma in a spooky, isolated cabin.
That is perfectly said. I should have
Yeah.
said that myself. Yes. Yes. And it has these narratives that intertwine, and there are no chapter breaks. And my goal was it's basically an omniscient point of view. So it goes into many different characters' heads. And that kind of swerving intertwining is part of I guess, the uncanny feel that I
Hmm.
like in stories. So yeah.
Outstanding. Well, Let the Gravity Seize the Dead. People can people pre-order now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, they can.
So people should pre-order it now so they can have their hot little hands on it on July 9th and then look for events this fall.
Yes.
Great. So Darrin, the book is the timing of why we're talking again. But like many of my guests, you have more than one favorite thing. So where are we going to start today?
Well, since we're kind of in the horror, arena already, I would love to talk about horror movies.
I love it. I love it. Now, I am not super a horror movie person, but if something gets a lot of buzz, I will go see it because I want to be able to have the conversation. I
Yeah.
want to be in the zeitgeist. So I will go and see movies that are too scary for me so I can participate in the conversation.
What ones?
Like Get Out.
Okay.
Or man, I saw Abigail a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. I like that.
Today we're gonna go see The TV Glows and the Glow of the TV.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, it's brand new. Like it just came out this week. So yeah, like things that Jordan Peele helps bring into the world, things that if I just hear enough that like it's good, it's worth it, it's, yeah, it's bloody and gory, but it says something about society or there's some big laughs, I'll go. And I will watch it through my hands.
Well, good for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's do a little bit of time traveling. What is your origin story with horror movies?
So glad you asked that. And I've thought about this in advance of our talk because, I had some distinct moments in my growing up, as probably everybody does. One of the earliest memories of experiencing horror was a very strange moment in my life. And I don't know how old I was. I know where I lived. I must have been 5, something like that. I'm guessing pretty young. And I got up, this is the 1970s. I got up. Nobody else was up. I don't know why I woke up. And something drew me out of the room. I walked in the living room and turned on the TV. And back then, TVs would go off the air,
right,
2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, whenever, and they would just sign off, and there'd be static. So I don't know what time this was. It could have been 11 o'clock at night. Maybe I just,
right.
everyone had just gone to bed, or it could have been super early in the morning. I have no clue. But for some reason, I didn't know it at the time, but they were showing Rosemary's Baby.
Ooh.
The Polanski movie where Mia Farrow basically gets impregnated by the devil. And it was the final scene. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but not the final scene, but very close to the end, when Rosemary has walked into this group of, Satanists, basically. And they show her baby, and she says, "What have you done to its eyes? What have you done to its eyes?" And the camera pans back, and there's this crazy dark jazz music playing, and it's probably, it's kind of the climactic moment of the movie.
Right.
So freaky, and I have no idea why was that on at why did I have
and
to
did you turn it on and it was going into that scene, so you didn't have any lead up either? It's just like, what did you do to my baby?
No, yes, exactly, yes. And so it obviously terrified me. And to this day, I don't know the context of what happened, but that was an indelible thing. So then after that, there were a couple other movies that, like the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, that with Gene Wilder.
Yeah.
It's pretty dark, and
it really is.
Yeah, it's freaky. And the scene where the girl eats all the blueberries or whatever, or chews the blueberry gum, I guess, and she starts swelling up and she becomes this giant blueberry, and face turns blue, and just her little arms and and the Oompa Loompas roll her away. And like Augustus Gloop, the little boy, drinks from the chocolate river, and he gets sucked up through these tubes. And there's a part where they're going down the river, and it's just a freak out scene. So I was pretty young during that one. That scared the crap out of me. And then there were the TV movies back in the 70s used to go pretty hard. There was this movie called Dark Night of the Scarecrow, where this like mentally challenged guy gets accused of a crime or somehow on the farm, and he hides like in a scarecrow. And I just remember the guy's like close up of his eyes through the thing, and he's terrified, and I think they just stab him to death with a pitchfork, and then he haunts them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the horror movies shown on TV and they would repeat.
Yes.
Like, so you would catch them at different times. So the one that is burned in my brain is, I think, Prom Night.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's a good one.
Right? Where a girl gets murdered at prom or she dies by accident there's a shard of glass that kills her, and it's a particular
Yeah,
shape. And
yeah.
then she comes back to haunt people. And it's, when I see a broken mirror, I'm like, uh-oh. Because there was this, my biggest memory from that movie is the mirror breaking and seeing the shard the same shape as the one that killed her.
Oh,
And now
yeah.
she's, as a ghost, is going to kill like more kids.
Yeah, so you get these little images in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
What good horror does.
Yeah.
They stay with you for
Yeah.
ever, it seems like.
Absolutely. Yeah. That and Children of the Corn, because I grew up in Indiana. The
Yeah.
Children of the Corn really wrecked me.
It hit home.
It
Well,
hit home.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
one of the other early ones is when I was a kid, we used to just ride our bikes everywhere, and you'd go to movies and try to sneak into our
Mm-hmm.
movies, of course. When I was 12, I snuck in. That's a dramatic term for it. They just didn't care, I don't think. We bought
Right.
it for something else and walked into something else. But the original Evil Dead was playing, and
Mm-hmm.
I was not prepared for that at age 12.
Yeah.
I've ever seen that movie. That's pretty wild and dark and a crazy movie. And it scared the bejesus out of me.
Yeah.
I remember I was with a friend and I was like embarrassed, but I just like, I got to go to the bathroom, and ducked out of there. I was trying to talk
Right.
myself down in the bathroom.
Yep. And like, I gotta go to the bathroom and I'll just linger at the back. And I'm like, can I come? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So how do you go from having these moments where they really scared you to it becoming one of your favorite genres of movie? Like,
Yeah.
what's the bridge for you where you get out of it's just too scary to like, it's something you appreciate?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, in some ways, I probably liked the scares deep down.
Yeah.
I must have, and wanted more. But you're right that, if it's that level of intensity, probably can't maintain that. I think it was honestly, I really started to love horror makeup. And
Mm.
so I remember I got a subscription to Fangoria magazine when I was about 9 or 10.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was older than that. Maybe it was even after the Evil Dead thing. I'm not sure. It must have been before that, because it gave me a safe way to experience it. They always had these cool full color images of all the gore, and so I just admired like how real it looked and how
Right.
cool it looked. And I remember like American Werewolf in London was one that they kept doing these features on, and that has amazing werewolf makeup. And it just created this buzz in my mind. I need to see this movie. I need to see.
Mm-hmm.
These things wouldn't come out sometimes for a long time. So I think it must have been that. It kind of made horror fun. It made me realize how make believe it was. I could
Right.
experience it that way.
Because it would have not just like the finished product, but it wouldn't have some like behind the scenes, like
Yeah,
layering the makeup on, and you'd get to, it
exactly.
really
Yep.
opened up like the process. Yeah.
Yeah, there'd be pictures of them doing the makeup on the creature, on the gore, and
Yeah.
yeah, it made you see it was all make believe.
Yeah. So what were some of the other movies in the 80s that were some of your favorites or key for you?
Definitely like American Werewolf in London.
Mm-hmm.
Huge, and that was a comedy horror too, and I really liked, that made me realize you could laugh, and
Yep.
that would take away some of the, you'd get scared and then laugh. And so I started really liking those. The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, is
Mm-hmm.
another amazing makeup one, and just a really cool movie, really well done. Of course, some of the classics, Friday the 13th movies were fun, but basically, like, a friend of mine and I, this was back in the VHS era, would just rent a bunch of horror movies and
Yeah.
have sleepover. And so we just saw just anything. I can remember like Maniac. I don't know if these names will mean anything to you. Pieces, Sleepaway Camp.
Sleepaway Camp, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's pretty wild. A lot of them are cheap. I think that
Mm-hmm.
the 80s was an amazing time because once, this VHS boom started, people could just make movies and, get them put in video stores. They weren't necessarily theatrically released.
Right.
And so they didn't have to worry about box office success. So you got a lot of people. There was amazing energy in some of those 80s movies.
Yeah.
Tourist Trap is another one stuck in my mind. Just I like The Burning. The Burning was came around right around the same time as Friday 13th, and it's a similar premise. It's got like a young George Costanza, whatever that guy's name is, Jason Alexander.
Yeah.
I think Holly Hunter, a very small part. Just some, that might have been the roles, but there was just a kind of an innocence and energy in these 80s horror movies. That they're not all self-referential, they're just having fun, and you can feel that. And so I loved a lot of that kind of stuff.
Nice. And you mentioned before we started recording that your favorite director in this genre is Sam Raimi.
Yes, one of my favorites.
One of your favorites, sorry.
Really one of the first, ones that I really latched on to as a, not a big name.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously the big names like John Landis and David Cronenberg and Toby Hooper and, these kind of well-known, Roman Polanski, these well-known horror people who've done horror movies. But Sam Raimi was kind of felt like I said, I saw that first Evil Dead when I was or whatever, and it scared the crap out of me. And fast forward 5 years and Evil Dead 2 comes out. See that with my friend, we've been watching horror movies all these years.
Yeah.
And this one was just bananas hilarious, like frenetic. It's almost more like a remake than a sequel.
Yeah.
And it's just got this zany camera work. It's more comedic and wildly gory, of course. But so I went from this one that terrified me to this one that cracks me up.
Yeah.
He was definitely instantly one of my favorites. And he's a Michigan guy too. And, you could feel the passion in stuff.
I'm trying to think if I've seen, I have not seen Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2, but I have listened. There's a podcast called Blank Check that they'll cover a director's whole career. So I have listened to many podcasts about Sam Raimi while watching like maybe just his Spider-Man.
Right.
Which are not horror movies.
No. They still have style. His style is very noticeable.
Yeah.
And if you ever want to brave it, Evil Dead 2 is great. It's not gonna it's more funny than it is scary. I think. But you just marvel at how they did this stuff with very small budget. There's just some great classic scenes.
Yeah. What are, for you, when you think about like the Evil Deads, what are those top moments or your favorite scenes or your favorite things that he gets done?
And anybody who's seen these, probably seen, if you've seen Evil Dead 2, you've probably seen it many times because you'll want to watch it again. There's a famous scene. Ash is the main character, and it's played by Bruce Campbell, who's was a friend and classmate of Sam Raimi's, and they did a lot of movies together. But anyway, there's a scene where his hand gets possessed, basically, and his hand is just moving around like this, and he's and they add these sound effects like, and it's smashing plates on his head, and it's pushing him into cupboards and stuff, and it even like one point like flips himself over, and it does spoil it. Spoiler alert: he has to chainsaw his own hand off, and
oh my gosh.
and he's like, who's laughing now? Who's laughing now? So anyway, and then his disembodied hand, is still not dead; it's still possessed, so it's scurrying around, causing him all kinds of havoc. So there's ones like that.
Amazing. Yeah, I remember hearing from on the podcast, like Bruce Campbell was his like just a traditionally good-looking guy, and was in all of his horror movies, right? Like was always had a part and was Sam Raimi's like one of his go-to actors.
Yes, definitely. Even in like Darkman is another really good Sam Raimi movie. That's I highly recommend. I don't know if that would be considered horror. It's more of it's real comic booky. It feels like it was based on a comic book, but it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But it's got Liam Neeson in it, which was kind of surprising. It was like this was before Liam Neeson, I think, was really well known at all.
Yeah.
Liam Neeson and Frances McDormand, and super, again, funny, frenetic, and all that. And the premise of that is that Liam Neeson gets terribly disfigured in this explosion. So they think he's dead. He hides away, and he's a scientist. So he builds a way to make basically a mask.
Mm-hmm.
But the mask will only last in the dark, and if it gets light on it, it starts to dissolve. So he tries to get revenge on the people that hurt him, and he, and so on and so forth. But the very end of that, there's a little Easter egg at the end when Darkman Liam Neeson escapes, and it's kind of this voiceover, I'm among you, and there's a guy walking down, you see the back of somebody walking down this city street, and it turns around, and it's Bruce Campbell. And,
nice.
So that kind of thing. So Sam Raimi always found a way to get Bruce Campbell into his movies.
Yeah.
Even in the Spider-Man movies, he pops up.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, he's like he's the theater guy who, I don't know if you remember when Tobey Maguire, right? Yeah, tries to go and see Kirsten Dunst in her play at the theaters, like the usher or something won't let him in. I don't know if you remember that scene. Or he also plays the wrestling MC guy in the first, when Spider-Man wants, he's going to enter this wrestling match. So anyway, he pops up in the Spider-Man movies.
Nice.
Gotta watch for him.
I pulled up Sam Raimi's IMDb, which is, he's so prolific. Oh my gosh. But he was a producer on Boy Kills World, which was a movie. So I'm a Regal Unlimited person.
What is that?
It's like $20 a month, $22 a month, and you can see all the movies you want at Regal theaters.
Oh, okay.
So I see the bar is on the floor as far as movies I'll see in the theater.
Yeah.
Before, it's expensive to go to the movies.
Right.
And so you're going to the ones that originally, it used to be movies that had to be seen in the theater. I saw in the theater, and then if I could wait till it was streaming, I would wait. But now that it's I have this, and they don't sponsor the show. They could. Hello, Regal Theaters, please sponsor my podcast. I see sometimes 2 movies a week.
Wow.
So
so you don't have to discriminate anymore. It doesn't go. That's great. So
Boy Kills World is one that Sam Raimi was a producer on, but it came and went so fast. It's Bill Skarsgård is the lead actor.
Okay.
And we saw the trailer once and kind of put it on our list as something we wanted to see. And it was gone from Chicago in 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
So we didn't catch it in time, which is a bummer.
Yeah. Yeah, he does produce a lot now as well. And he doesn't really do much horror anymore, which is, to my chagrin. I do love the Spider-Man movies, but he did come out in 2009 with Drag Me to Hell, which is another super fun actual horror movie that really harkened back to his old ways. So.
Yeah. Huh. So when you're looking, do you like new horror, or do you typically prefer 70s, 80s, 90s horror?
Oh yeah, I am always looking for new stuff.
Yeah.
It's never gone away. There's sort of ebbs and flows with what my opinion is of the quality overall, but there's always interesting kind of indie stuff going on. And yeah, I would say the 2010s and stuff were actually a really good time for horror. You got bigger ones like Ari Aster doing Hereditary and Midsummer, and you mentioned Jordan Peele, of course. But there's a lot of little bit less well-known ones like Oz Perkins, who's the son of Anthony Perkins, who was in Psycho.
Yep.
Yeah, Oz Perkins. I love The Black Coat's Daughter by him. I'm the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House is a really great movie. Robert Eggers, who did The Witch and The Lighthouse. His stuff is really interesting. He's coming out with I think a new version of Nosferatu. So yeah, that one sounds really good. There's been a lot of really good ones lately.
Yeah.
I'm always looking. I mean, I think the streaming phenomenon is like a double-edged sword. You get a lot
Yeah.
of like very competently done but bland movies out of
Yeah.
them, I think.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of these ones that are like direct to Hulu or direct to Netflix, and they're just kind of like they feel more like TV shows than movies. So
Yeah.
you do have to sift through a lot of things. But I'm happy to sift through them.
Yeah. There's one we've been seeing previews for lately. I think it's called The Strangers Chapter 1.
Yeah. Yep.
That will not be seeing that one. That one looks just too scary for me.
Yeah.
But it's, like it's a couple from the city. They're on a road trip. They get an Airbnb. It's a cabin in the woods
Right.
in a
Right.
creepy little town.
Yes. Yes.
And they like cut the power to the cabin and then just start like scaring the shit out of them.
Or killing. Yeah. Or scaring. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds very similar to the first. I've seen the other two. I think there have only been two others of the strangers, and they're decently done. They don't come to a whole lot. It's just basically these mysterious people. You never know who they are, why they're doing it. It
Oh.
mess you up. So
So
it
this is
this is like a third one, I think.
oh.
Strangers franchise. Yeah,
Okay. So other people who actually see horror movies would be like,
I
this is the origin. I thought this was the
think so.
start of a new.
Right. Right. No.
Instead, they're going back and saying, like, let's show you their first murder.
I think so. Yeah, I'm
Uh,
guessing. I've only just recently that movie weirdly is directed by I just saw is directed by Rennie Harlan, who used to do action movies in the '90s, like
mm,
Long Kiss Goodnight was
yeah.
one of his. He infamously made Cutthroat Island, which was one of the most biggest box office bombs of all time. I mean,
Yeah.
probably set this guy's career back like a long way, but it just was interesting to see that he's directing this horror movie now.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. So when you watch horror movies, do you like to go to see them in the theater? Do you watch them at home? Do you watch them during the day? Is it at night, like lights off? Do you make it as scary as possible around you to watch a horror movie? Or is it like lights are on and there's a safe escape?
Definitely the former. Yeah,
Yeah.
as scary as possible. I mean, the theater question, I always love to see stuff in the theater. It's sometimes
Yeah.
just possible, and we don't have we're in a small town, so we basically have one theater, so it's we don't have a lot of things to choose from, but
Yeah.
I do love to see them in the theater. And barring that, yeah, lights off, definitely. It's so rare that I actually get scared anymore, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
I long for that, if at least I can feel a kind of dread or unease or,
Mm-hmm.
there've been a few like The Innkeepers is a really good
Mm-hmm.
story. That one definitely put me in a creeped out mindset. The Autopsy of Jane Doe. We're talking about like more contemporary
Okay.
ones.
Yeah.
That one was really, really creepy. Under the Skin, which is
Just the
directed.
name is enough.
That
I'm
one's
creeped out.
yeah. That one is just really kind of beautiful, but also just really unsettling.
Yeah.
Unsettling. It's, that's directed by the guy that just directed the Zone of Interest, which you
Okay.
earlier. So yeah, but to answer your question, yeah, I do. I try to make it as creepy as possible.
Yeah. Well, if you want to feel unease, it's not specifically horror, but Civil War.
Yes,
I
I
don't know
want
if
to.
it is the tension throughout is so high key. And it was a movie where, like, when I got home, I think I had to sit in my car for half an hour to still try and come like down from the like final moments.
Wow. Yeah, that's another director that I've been following for a while, Alex Garland, who
Mm-hmm.
did Ex Machina, and where there's this comet that hits and it creates this kind of strange environment, and these people that go in to investigate.
Annihilation.
Annihilation, yes, yes. So those Ex Machina and that one are kind of more in the sci-fi horror
Mm-hmm.
arena, and he's definitely a great director. Great. Oh, he also did Men. That one was a really interesting movie, I thought. So yeah, I've been looking forward to Civil War, but I'm kind of scared to watch it because it is so like current, and it seems like the kind of
Yeah,
horror might hit home a little too much.
it does, but you definitely never know who the good guys are.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's an exploration about the role of war journalists.
Mm,
Like the protagonists are two war photographers and two war journalists. And part of it is exploring like intervention.
mm.
Is it the journalist's job to stop someone from being murdered?
Yeah, wow.
And
Yeah.
so it's there's a level at which there's like educating the viewer about journalism and them like experiencing new trauma on top of their old trauma of other wars they've been in, but it's set in our current world,
Yes.
and that is very unnerving.
Yeah, that is unnerving. And I think that's kind of why I've held off on seeing it.
Yeah,
It's gonna stress me out a lot. And
yeah,
he's a really good director who knows how to kind of steer,
yeah.
the emotions
The
really well.
cinematography and the sound design. Like
Mm,
when people are having panic attacks in it, there's no sound
yeah,
and you are in it. And it
yeah.
is the sound design for me was one of the things that heightened the tension the most.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
cool. Good to know. I will definitely see it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like other movies in the last few years that have really left me. I think The Northman.
Yeah, that's also Robert Eggers who did
Okay.
The Lighthouse and what did I say? The Lighthouse and
The Witch.
The Witch, yep. Yeah, he's a really good director. That was a cool movie as well.
Yeah. That was another one where I remember sitting in my car for a long time afterwards, just trying not to feel nauseous because it was
Nice.
so like dark and visceral. And I don't know, it was such a stressful movie.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. Yeah, he knows how to create that kind of tone and atmosphere
Yeah.
very well. I think I recommend like I'm wearing a Dead Alive shirt.
Yeah.
It's another these horror comedies you might find
Mm-hmm.
liking. I mentioned Evil Dead 2. So right around the same time that I started really getting to Sam Raimi,
Mm-hmm.
mid to late 80s, I also became aware of Peter Jackson, who went on to do the Lord of the Rings
Yeah.
movies. But his early career as a young indie New Zealand director was Bad Taste was the first one, which is basically like an alien, aliens come down to,
Uh-huh.
and it's got some wacky gore in it, but it's more, I don't know, it's more like kind of sci-fi comedy horror. And then there's this one, Dead Alive, which blew my mind when I saw it in a similar way to Evil Dead, which is it's just super funny and it's
Yeah.
wildly gory, of course, but almost cartoonishly so. So you're never feeling like, disturbed. Well, you might be a little bit grossed
Yeah.
out. That kind of thing. Because this one's like basically about this, monkey that has some kind of like what do I want to say? A zombie infection and bites
Mm.
somebody else. And it's one of those movies where, it just kind of passes along the zombie gene. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's quite exciting. So Peter
Nice.
Jackson used to do. He also did one called The Frighteners, which was kind of a zany, funny horror movie. So I recommend checking out some of those if you're.
Okay.
They might like at least you'll still be exhilarated and stuff, but more in the laughing, more
Yeah.
and not so much trying to terrify or unnerve you.
Yeah. And those sound kind of, I did see, and this is part of like, well, the tickets are all free essentially. We've already paid for them. I saw Five Nights at Freddy's,
Oh yeah, I
which
haven't seen.
is
Yeah,
like based on a video game, scary, but like funny, scary,
yeah.
So the movie was less scary than the previews, I would say.
Oh
They
wow.
they did a really good job cutting the previews.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
happens sometimes. Yeah, yeah. I haven't seen that one. And I know a lot of people that are a little younger than me know that video game, which I don't at all. So
Yeah.
Little
I didn't
harps.
know the video game at all, but I went out to dinner with two of my nephews, and they were just like, "Oh, well, like Five Nights at Freddy 1, this happens, and then this, and then did you do the side quest over here and this one and blah blah blah?" And they're just like 20 minutes, and I was like, "What's happening? What's going on?" Yeah,
I didn't know it went that deep.
it goes that deep if you are between the ages of 13 and 26.
Ah, gotcha. Yep.
So, Darrin, I'm curious, if you got to be a producer on a horror movie, what director would you what director would you hire? Sort
Hmm.
of what within the genre of horror, would you want to go monster horror, spooky cabin horror, funny, so sort of like your subgenre and your director and maybe your setting.
Ooh, man, that's a really tough question. We have too many to choose from. You know, it could be obvious, and pick a director like Ari Aster, who's kind of really. At least I didn't see Beau is Afraid, but that seems a little less horror. But her
Mm-hmm.
some are really distinctive, and I can just see how much those movies have influenced other directors, just taking
Mm-hmm.
his stylistic things. So in a very short time, but honestly, I would probably want to give a woman director a chance
Yeah.
because there are really good women directors out there, and I try to take note of all these people and follow them. And sadly, I see a lot of like women directors who do like one killer movie, and then they just start doing TV episodes, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
when you come have a movie again. But I think maybe Jennifer Kent, who did
Okay.
the Babadook, which was just a really interesting movie. I thought
Yeah.
had some elements that are familiar, but she had enough of a spin on it. And it was a real gutsy, I thought, portrayal of like motherhood,
Mm-hmm.
a way that I haven't seen in a while. So maybe I give her the reins. And as far as what style, gosh, like I can enjoy so many different types
Yeah.
that, but I think honestly, why not go full blown horror? And
Yeah.
I love the comedy stuff too. But I do like her style. I like kind of what I would call domestic horror,
Okay.
where it's not necessarily clear what. How should I say this? Like the monster in it comes from a sort of symbiosis with the psychologies of the characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily just like a killer, or a vampire. It's like some kind of a representation in a way, or could be, of the dissonance in their own lives, or the
Yeah.
wounds that they have. And she really did that well in the Babadook. So I would want something like that. And
Okay.
something that just kind of builds a steady sense of dread. I think I really like that dread and tension
Mm-hmm.
to me, because sometimes the dread and the tension are the best part of the movie. Once you know what the creature is, or they reveal the supernatural element, then it kind of
Yeah.
sort of, to me, it's hard to land those endings in a lot of movies. And like the Babadook, I thought was a great example of one that, even though you knew, you never really know what the. Have you ever seen that one?
I haven't
Hmm.
because what I know of it, it seems very scary.
Yeah.
And I guess I thought the Babadook was like a monster.
It
It
kind of
is.
is.
Yeah.
I mean, it manifests in that way,
Yeah.
but also this child and mother's relationship is so tumultuous right
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning, and there's clearly a history and stuff that they're working through. That a dead father basically is one of the things, and
Yeah.
so the Babadook, it could kind of be a manifestation of just kind of the emotional turmoil of them, and
Yeah.
it might not be like a literal monster, and maybe you know it's up to the viewer, I think, to decide, yes, it really is. But I think the best horror can work kind of almost kind of allegorically.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is and it isn't, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And I think that's what she does really well in that. And that's what some of my favorite horror does.
Mm-hmm.
Like same with like Hereditary. There's this trauma in it, and it's
Yeah.
really about this family that's suffering and their lack of communication and so on and so forth. And so any kind of monsters in it are really just like in line with the people's
Right.
conflicts.
That was one that I went and read the Wikipedia for.
No, I don't blame you. That one's pretty intense. That one's
Yeah. Yeah. That I will sometimes if it drives my friend Ronnie, who I see movies with, it drives him crazy because I am happy to spoil a horror movie for myself. I won't do it to him, but I have really distinct memories of being on a business trip in a hotel watching season 1 of Stranger Things and having to press pause and go read the summaries of the episodes because it got to a point where I was like, well, too scary.
yes,
I gotta know what happens when
yeah.
when they go through this tree because it's too scary. And I spoiled it for myself and I was like, okay, it's safe. I can go watch it now.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a reasonable way to do it. If
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be too distracting and too like tumultuous for you to be worried
Yeah.
of what's coming, just find out what's coming, and then
Yeah.
that might not be as bad as you think.
Yeah. And then Abigail is one which is in the theaters right now,
Yeah.
where after I saw it, I was like, I really wish they'd cut the trailer differently
Hmm.
because there's really good tension building in the first act.
Yeah,
But because you've seen the trailer, you know what the monster is.
I agree with you on that. I saw it as well, and
Yeah.
I hadn't heard it. I'd like to go into it not knowing any movie,
Yeah.
but maybe especially horror movies, just not knowing anything about it. And
Yeah.
this one, yeah, it was like, oh, people kidnap a girl and she's a vampire, and so
Yeah.
why did you tell me that? Like, I
Yeah.
would love to, like you said, like I would. There was great tension built up, but the knowing of it, you know, took away
Yeah.
in that case.
I thought if they had cut in, if in the trailer they could have used, because there are some male vampires at the very end,
Yep,
they
yep,
could have used them in the trailer.
yep, exactly.
They could have used the scene in the pool. Whoa,
Oh
that was
gosh,
right.
yeah,
There are
yeah,
ways you could have shown
right.
that these people are locked in a scary house
Yes,
and
just
bad things are going to happen
right, right.
without the reveal of Abigail. And
Yes,
it would have been a much more satisfying movie.
I totally agree. Yep,
Yeah.
'cause it was a well done movie.
I thought they
And
did great practical effects.
yes, that's a huge. Going back to what I was saying before,
Yeah.
that's a huge thing for me. I just can't stand CGI
Mm-hmm.
for the most part. They've gotten better at it. They've gotten better at what they've gotten better at, I think, is mixing practical and CGI.
Right.
So you can't quite tell, what it is. But yeah, that one
Yeah.
had good practical effects, and I still admire that. Like that's what I look for.
Mm-hmm.
I still have a subscription to Fangoria, by the way. So
Nice.
I didn't continue it all those decades, but I picked
Right.
it again
Picked
about
it back up.
7, 8 years ago. Yeah, yeah.
Nice. Are there any movies you're looking forward to that you've heard are on the horizon or through Fangoria are being worked on?
Yeah. Oh, well, that Nosferatu, the
Yeah.
Robert Eggers one, definitely looking forward to that one. What other ones are there? I know I write them down all the time. It takes work, to be writing down these things.
Mm-hmm.
Civil War was one, definitely. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's strictly a horror movie or not, but The Coffee Table is one that, is like, oh, this is something you've never seen before. And it's so freaky. And it's like they get this haunted coffee table, basically, is what it sounds like to me.
Ah.
But I'm curious about it. So the coffee table, and then there's this one called In a Violent Nature that's gotten a lot of hype, and they're pitching it like, imagine Friday the 13th from Jason's point of view, So it's
Hmm.
basically like the killer walking around doing these things, and which to me sounds like I don't know how you're going to maintain that for a whole movie,
Right.
because it's not like Jason is the most fun guy to spend an hour and a half.
Right.
But maybe I kind of like this idea of,
Maybe he does crossword puzzles or,
hey, there you go.
jigsaw.
Yeah,
Maybe he's a jigsaw guy. Butchers
Yeah,
his own meat.
fascinating to watch, or he's a really
Yeah.
good fisherman or something like that.
Right. Turns out Jason is a Twitch streamer,
Yeah.
really into Red Dead Redemption.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are a couple that pop up, but I'm trying to think. I can't think of other ones off the top of my head.
Darrin, is there anything about Sam Raimi, 80s horrors, the horror genre in general, that I haven't asked you about that you would be bummed not to mention?
I think what impresses me the most about horrors is the range of it. We've already
Mm-hmm.
talked about a lot of different kinds, and even like whether or not things fit into that or don't,
Right.
do or don't fit into the genre. And I think horror just lets you explore things in such a wide range. They can be dramatic, they can be funny, they can be, deeply disturbing,
Yeah.
can be cathartic. It can be, social commentary. I think a lot of them, like you mentioned, Civil War. I think most good horror movies have some kind of social commentary in them. Not that they're saying like, do this, do that. I think the best ones just kind of bring up ideas
Yeah.
about wealth and class or about the things that scare us,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the shared zeitgeist at the
Yeah.
moment. And so it's a far more diverse genre, I think, than a lot of people who don't watch it or read it or whatever know about.
Yeah.
That they think of horror as like, oh, it's like the Saw movies, it's just killers or it's monsters. But
Right.
yeah, I think that's a big thing for me is that it's more. It's not one or the other, but there's types of horror that have to do with just human nature or
Mm-hmm.
the quieter things, the psychological elements.
Yeah.
That's the stuff I really like. There's a really great movie, and they don't have to be gory. That's the other thing that
Right.
I talked a lot about how much I like the makeup effects. But some of the best ones, like Rosemary's Baby, has no gore in it,
Mm-hmm.
and like there's a movie called Creep. It's so good. Again, it's sort of comedic, but it's also very slow tension, and I don't want to spoil too much
Okay.
about that one, but that's a really fun one where this guy basically like I can't remember if it's like a kind of like a Craigslist ad type thing or like somebody wants to hire him to be a videographer for him. So it's all handheld camera basically of this guy who's like going to go to this stranger's house and meet him and film him. And I can't remember even what the premise was of that, but that's how he kind of ingratiates himself to this guy who ends up being more strange than he bargained for.
Ooh.
And
Yeah.
but it's funny. It's actually really funny until it's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It disarms you. So that's another good example where there's really not really much gore at all to speak of in that movie, if any.
It's the tension, it's the dread, it's the
Exactly.
unease.
Yes, yes, and
Yeah.
character is character building, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I guess that's something that I would like people to know
Yeah.
is that it doesn't have to be teenagers, getting picked off one by one.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah,
Oh, did you see the Juneteenth horror movie? I think it was called The Blackening.
I did not. No, that's one that was on my list. And did you?
I did. I
How was
did. It's fun. It
hmm,
is like, people getting picked off,
yep.
and it's funny, it's weird. It
Oh,
was a good twist on the genre.
okay. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of the sense I picked up is it's a little bit of this kind of I mean, really, ever since Scream, the
Yeah.
original Scream, there have been a lot of the horror where they kind of recognize, hey, we're in a horror
Right.
kind of situation. That's and I think it still can be done well. Sometimes it's done poorly, but I think that it still can be done well.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
this one we thought it was fun. I didn't I didn't get the twist, but I never want like I'm not interested in outsmarting a movie. I'm
yeah,
not trying. I just want to go along for the ride,
I'm the same way. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So I figure out the twist. It surprised me. It was for me it was like a really fun scary. It was scary,
yeah.
but I didn't figure it out and it worked for me.
I didn't know there was a twist, so I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. Like I don't try to think too hard about plot when I'm watching and try
Mm-hmm.
to put the pieces together. And I'll be like, oh, that's the killer, or that's whatever. But I'm usually wrong, and I don't care. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm more like you. I just want to just let it happen. And
Yeah. It's like if I go on a roller coaster, if I were to go to a haunted house, which I'm not going to do, that's too scary. But for me, it's the same thing as going on a roller coaster, like, or going to see magicians. I'm
yeah,
not going to outsmart or be too cool for it. Like, I
yeah,
want to have the emotions.
yeah. Why do you want to know the tricks? Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't go to haunted houses much either. So, it's weird because like I love horror movies, but like I don't want people jumping out at me. Or
Yeah.
weird thing, we did go to a haunted house in Japan. I was there with my wife and
Oh.
two sons, and they must have been like 10 and 12, around that age. And
Mm-hmm.
it was a haunted house that they said was for like ages 5 and up. And I was
Uh-oh.
like, oh, this will be fine. And you had to go in like in groups of like 2 or 3. So it was like me and my sister-in-law, who's married to my brother. They lived in Japan. She's Japanese. And my older son, who's 12. And then my wife and my 10-year-old went separately.
Okay.
Have you ever seen The Ring? But, classic Japanese, or Ringu,
Uh-huh.
Japanese horror with the long, straight black
Yeah.
girls. So this was a haunted house that had no people in it, but it was just terrifying. Like
Ugh.
all these rooms were like green and glowing, and they had like, you couldn't tell if they were people or if they were mannequins or what,
Uh-huh.
all over. This thing was terrifying. And I was going first, and they're both huddled behind me, holding on. And I couldn't believe that it was for like ages 5 and up, they
Oh
said.
no. No,
So
no,
maybe
no.
we have a hardier children than us. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, that was my latest and probably one of my only haunted house experiences.
Yeah. I mean, that's where a horror movie is at least a contained experience.
Yes.
And unless you're going to a 4DX theater, nothing's going to touch you.
Yeah, you're guaranteed that. Yeah.
Yeah. Your autonomy will be respected.
Yes. Yeah, very true.
And it ends.
And you don't have to keep like walking and yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like physically doing things. You can just close your eyes if you want to escape the horror movie.
Yeah.
Go to the bathroom, but you can't do that in a
No.
in a haunted house. Yeah.
Well, Darrin, it's been such a treat to get to talk again.
Yeah, I've had a great time. Thank you.
So, again, your new book, Let Gravity Seize the Dead, can be pre-ordered now. It'll be shipped on July 9th, 2024. Yes. Where can people find you on the internet?
Can I show the cover of this thing?
Yes.
I think the cover is pretty cool. I don't know if you can see that all. I can't see myself well, but yeah, it's like a skeleton of a rabbit with a bunch of leaves and vines.
I'll say it's really nicely animated on your website.
Yes, thanks. I paid, there's some person who can animate book covers, and it's pretty cheap. So I was like, wow.
No, it looks cool. Really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, so the website darrindoyle.com is a good place to just go find. There's a pre-order link there. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. You just type in Darrin Doyle, DarrinDoyle, and you should find me.
Outstanding. We'll link to you in the show notes.
All right, thank you.
So that people can find you.
Thank you.
Please rate and review Finding Favorites on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us on Instagram, Finding Faves Pod, FindingFavs Pod, POD. It is edited and engineered by Rob Abrazado. And I don't know. That's it. Keep enjoying your favorite things. Thank you for coming, Darrin. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Leah. It was a big pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.